Okay, so you know how we always say to expect the unexpected? Well, today we are really taking that to heart
Yeah.
because we are heading to Argentina. But um, forget those dramatic Andean peaks and high-altitude vineyards we usually talk about.
Right.
We're going coastal today. Uh, we're diving deep into a region that's making waves for all the right reasons. Mar del Plata, with its unique Atlantic terroir.
This is a region that really challenges those preconceived notions of what Argentinian wine can be.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got a ton of material to dig into here. The history of winemaking on this coast, the influence of the ocean on the grapes and the winemaking techniques, the distinct flavors and aromas, and of course what the future holds for this emerging region.
It's a fascinating story of pioneers and innovators.
So what's our mission today with all this info?
Well, for me, it's all about understanding what makes Mar del Plata so distinctive.
Yeah, and for our listeners, those of you tuning in, we want to give you a clear and concise understanding of what makes these wines so special and why you should be seeking them out. We're going for those aha moments, those surprising details that stick with you without getting bogged down in, overly technical jargon.
There's definitely no need for a wine dictionary here.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, so Mar del Plata, it's on the Atlantic coast, obviously, but, coastal wine regions aren't exactly what comes to mind when we think of Argentina, right?
Not typically, no, but that's part of what makes it so intriguing.
Right, so tell me about the early days of winemaking there. How did it even get started in a place that, maybe wasn't seen as ideal for growing grapes?
Well, the early attempts at viticulture in Mar del Plata faced some pretty significant challenges right from the start.
Like what?
Well, the climate there is drastically different from those, traditional inland wine regions of Argentina.
Okay, good.
You're talking about high humidity, a constant salty sea breeze, moderate temperatures instead of, scorching heat and those relentless strong winds.
Wow. So not exactly a walk in the park for those early winemakers.
No, not at all.
It's amazing that they even persevered.
Well, they did, and it's a testament to their vision and determination.
So who were these pioneers who saw potential where others might have just given up?
Well, there wasn't one single figurehead, but rather a collective of forward-thinking producers who, really believed in the potential of this coastal terroir.
And they were willing to take risks.
Absolutely.
So what were some of the key things they did to turn the tide, so to speak?
Well, firstly, they were very strategic in the grape varieties they chose. They had to identify those that could not only survive, but thrive in these, unique conditions.
Okay.
So they focused on varieties like Chardonnay Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling Pinot Noir, and even Albarino started to gain traction.
Albarino, interesting.
Yeah, it's a grape that's traditionally associated with coastal regions in Spain, like Rías Baixas. So it kind of makes sense that it would find a home in Mar del Plata, too.
It's like it has that maritime spirit in its DNA or something.
Right. And it wasn't just about choosing the right grapes. They also had to adapt their cultivation techniques to this coastal environment.
So give me some examples, like what did they actually do differently?
Well, they started using specialized trellising systems.
Right.
These are basically elevated structures that support the vines and allow for better air circulation, which helps to combat that high humidity.
Oh, that makes sense.
And they also had to be mindful of the salinity in the soil, so they opted for rootstocks that were more resistant to salt.
So these rootstocks are like the foundation of the vine, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're the base on which the grape variety is grafted, and they can be chosen for specific traits like, salt tolerance, drought resistance, and so on.
So a lot of careful planning and experimentation went into this.
Oh, absolutely. It was a process of trial and error to figure out what truly worked in this very specific coastal setting.
And was there ever a point where it seemed like maybe it just wasn't going to work, or were they always pretty confident?
I think there were definitely moments of doubt along the way, but ultimately their belief in the potential of this terroir and their dedication to the craft kept them going.
And that dedication eventually paid off, wouldn't you say?
Definitely one of the biggest turning points was the establishment of the Indication Géographique, or IG, Mar del Plata.
Right. That's a pretty big deal in the wine world.
It's essentially a formal recognition that acknowledges the quality and distinctiveness of the wines from a specific geographical area.
Like a stamp of authenticity and quality.
Exactly. And in the case of Mar del Plata, it directly links the wine's characteristics, those, lively acidity levels and subtle saline notes to their origin.
So it's saying these qualities come from this place and nowhere else.
Right. And it also provides legal protection. So only wines that meet the specific criteria of the IG can use the Mar del Plata name.
It's like a guarantee for consumers that they're getting the real deal.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the history and the pioneers. Now let's really get into the nitty-gritty of what makes this terroir Atlantico so unique. What is it about this coastal location that sets it apart from, anywhere else in the world?
Well, the Atlantic Ocean is obviously the key defining factor here. Its influence on the climate is multi-layered and really shapes the character of the wines.
So it's not just being by the ocean, it's the specific way the ocean interacts with the land.
Right.
So tell me more about this interplay.
Well, firstly, the ocean acts as a natural temperature regulator. It moderates the extremes. You don't get those scorching hot days or freezing cold nights that you might see in more inland regions.
So it's like a giant thermal blanket keeping things more even.
Yeah, good analogy.
So that means a longer growing season.
Right, and more importantly, it means a slower, more gradual ripening of the grapes.
Okay.
And this is crucial because slower ripening allows those grapes to develop a wider range of aromas and flavors, and it also preserves that crucial acidity that gives Mar del Plata wines their, vibrancy and freshness.
Makes sense.
And then there are the sea breezes, those consistent winds coming off the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
They act like a natural air conditioning system for the vineyards, cooling the grapes and further contributing to that slower ripening.
So like Mother Nature's perfect temperature control.
Precisely. And we can't forget about the coastal fog.
Oh, right. Fog in Argentina? That's not something I would have pictured.
It might seem surprising, but those cool, misty mornings play a role too.
How so?
Well, the fog further moderates temperatures and adds to the humidity, which can actually influence the development of the grape skins.
Interesting. So we've got the air, the temperature, the wind, the fog. It's like a whole orchestra of elements at play.
Exactly, and it's all orchestrated by the Atlantic.
And what about the soil? I mean, the ground beneath the vines must also play a role in shaping these wines, right?
Absolutely. The soils in Mar del Plata have their own compelling story to tell. They're typically a blend of clay and limestone, which provides good drainage and structure. But what's really fascinating is the presence of marine fossils.
Marine fossils, so remnants of ancient sea creatures embedded in the soil.
Yes, it's a reminder that this land was once submerged beneath the ocean.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
And it suggests a unique mineral composition. These fossils can break down and release minerals into the soil, which are then absorbed by the vines, and potentially contribute to the wine's typicity, those subtle mineral nuances that you often find in Mar del Plata wines.
Like what kind of mineral notes are we talking about?
You might pick up hints of salinity, a sort of sea saltiness, or a stony, flinty quality.
So it's not just the maritime air. The very earth has a connection to the ocean's past.
Exactly. It's a fascinating interplay of geology and climate.
And all of this, the climate, the soils, the winds, the fog, it all comes together to create this concept of terroir Atlantico, right?
Right. It's that specific combination of factors that defines the style of Mar del Plata wines.
And how would you describe that style?
Well, compared to the wines from Argentina's more continental regions, which tend to be, quite concentrated and powerful,
Yeah.
Mar del Plata wines are generally fresher, lighter in body, and possess that distinctive saline minerality we keep talking about.
Okay, so there's a real sense of lightness and vibrancy.
Yeah.
And that ocean influence is palpable in the glass.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got the big picture of the terroir. Now let's zoom in on the vineyards themselves. How are the winemakers adapting their practices to this, rather unique environment?
Well, as we touched on earlier, selecting the right grape varieties is absolutely fundamental.
Right.
Certain varieties have shown a remarkable ability to not just adapt, but to really express themselves beautifully in this Atlantic climate.
So it's not just about survival, it's about thriving.
Exactly.
So give me some examples. What are some of the star performers?
We'll take Chardonnay, for example.
Okay.
In Mar del Plata, it develops a vibrant, almost zesty acidity along with these lovely citrus and white fruit notes. Think of lemon, grapefruit, green apple. And of course, you often find that underlying minerality.
It's like the classic Chardonnay profile, but with a coastal twist.
Right. It's a very different expression compared to the richer, more tropical, fruit-driven Chardonnays you might find from warmer Argentinian regions.
So the same grape, but a completely different personality shaped by the terroir.
Precisely.
And what about Sauvignon Blanc? I understand that's another variety that's doing well there.
Sauvignon Blanc in Mar del Plata is often quite expressive and aromatic. You get those classic herbaceous notes like cut grass or passion fruit leaf, but they're beautifully balanced by vibrant citrus aromas like grapefruit, and sometimes even a hint of passion fruit itself.
And I'm guessing that saline minerality comes through as well.
Absolutely. It's often even more pronounced in the Sauvignon Blanc than in the Chardonnay, contributing to a really refreshing and lingering finish.
So we've got these lively and refreshing white wines. And what about the reds? Pinot Noir was mentioned as having potential in this cooler climate.
Yes, Pinot Noir has really shown promise in Mar del Plata.
Uh,
The cooler temperatures help to preserve its delicate aromas and allow for the development of those, soft, supple tannins and those fresh red fruit flavors like cherry and raspberry.
so it's not a big, bold Pinot Noir.
No, it tends to be a lighter-bodied, more elegant style,
Uh-huh.
emphasizing finesse and freshness over power and concentration.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
So it seems like across the board, the coastal influence really encourages this, dialing back of intensity
Yeah.
and a focus on freshness, minerality, and those more delicate aromas.
Definitely.
But it can't all be smooth sailing in these coastal vineyards, right? What are some of the specific challenges they face?
You're right. There are definitely some unique challenges that come with this coastal environment.
Okay.
Frost can be a concern, particularly during spring bud break when those young shoots are vulnerable.
Right.
And those strong winds we talked about earlier can also cause damage to the vines and the developing grapes.
And I imagine the humidity must create a breeding ground for fungal diseases.
Absolutely. They have to be very vigilant in managing things like mildew.
And then there's the overarching challenge of climate change, which is affecting vineyards everywhere.
Yes, that's a global concern, and Mar del Plata is no exception.
But it sounds like they're rising to the occasion.
They are. There's a growing movement towards sustainable and organic farming practices in the region, which is really encouraging.
So they're thinking about the long-term health of the vineyards and the environment?
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between, respecting the land and producing high-quality wines.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about how the grapes are grown and the challenges they face now. Let's move into the winery. What are some of the winemaking techniques that are used to really capture and enhance that coastal character?
Well, for the white wines, the focus is often on preserving that inherent freshness and vibrancy that we've been talking about.
right.
So you'll often see them fermenting in stainless steel tanks,
Okay.
which helps to retain those bright, fruity aromas and that crisp acidity.
So no oak for these wines.
Not always. Some producers do experiment with oak, but it's usually a very judicious use. Maybe a small percentage of the blend aged in oak barrels just to add a touch of complexity and texture, but it's never overdone.
So the oak is playing a supporting role, not stealing the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The goal is to let the fruit and the terroir shine through.
And what about the red wines, especially that elegant Pinot Noir?
For the reds, and particularly for Pinot Noir, the winemakers are very mindful of preserving that inherent elegance.
Okay.
So they might use gentle extraction techniques during maceration, which is the process of soaking the grape skins with the juice.
Okay.
This helps to avoid extracting harsh tannins, which could overwhelm the delicate fruit character.
So it's all about finesse.
Very much so. And aging might also occur in oak, but again, with a light touch, just to add a bit of structure and complexity without masking the wine's natural freshness.
So there's a real sense of restraint and respect for the grapes in the winemaking.
Absolutely. The winemakers are really trying to work in harmony with the terroir rather than trying to impose their will on it.
It's like they're letting the grapes tell their story.
And the enologist or winemaker plays a crucial role in all of this.
Right. They're the ones making those key decisions throughout the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're constantly balancing the natural acidity, the freshness of the fruit, the minerality, and the wine's overall aging potential.
So it's a delicate balancing act.
It is. They need a deep understanding of the raw materials they're working with and a clear vision for the style of wine they want to create.
And we have a note here about indigenous yeasts. Is that something that's being explored in Mar del Plata?
Yes, that's a really interesting development.
Yeah.
Some winemakers are starting to experiment with using indigenous yeasts.
So these are the wild yeasts that are naturally present in the vineyards and the winery.
Right.
And why is that significant?
Well, using indigenous yeasts can potentially lead to a more complex and site-specific flavor profile in the wines.
Okay.
It's like adding another layer of terroir expression. Those yeasts are part of the unique ecosystem of the vineyards, and they can contribute to the wine's sense of place.
So it's like capturing the essence of the vineyard in a bottle.
That's a great way to put it.
All right, so we've covered the growing and the making. Now let's get to the tasting.
Mm.
What can someone expect when they actually open a bottle of Mar del Plata wine? Let's start with the white wines. Paint me a picture of those flavor profiles.
All right, so imagine you're pouring a glass of Mar del Plata Chardonnay.
Okay, I'm there.
The first thing you'll notice is that vibrant acidity that really jumps out at you. It's like a burst of freshness on the palate.
Refreshing.
And then you'll start to pick up those aromas and flavors of citrus fruits, like lemon and lime mingling with crisp white fruits like green apple, maybe a touch of pear, and underlying it all is that subtle minerality, that whisper of sea salt or wet stones.
It sounds like a really lively and elegant Chardonnay.
It is. It's a style that's really gaining popularity.
That
People are looking for wines with more acidity and less oak influence.
makes sense. And what about the Sauvignon Blanc? How does that differ?
Well, the Sauvignon Blanc is typically even more aromatic and expressive.
Hmm.
You get those classic herbaceous notes of cut grass or passion fruit leaf, but they're beautifully integrated with the citrus aromas of grapefruit and passion fruit. And that saline minerality is often more pronounced in the Sauvignon Blanc, giving it a really crisp and persistent finish.
It sounds like a wine that would be perfect for a warm summer evening.
Absolutely. It's incredibly refreshing.
And let's not forget about the reds. What can we expect from a Mar del Plata Pinot Noir?
Well, a Pinot Noir from this region is all about elegance and finesse.
Okay.
On the nose, you'll find delicate aromas of fresh red fruits like cherry and raspberry, maybe with some subtle earthy undertones or a hint of spice.
Sounds lovely.
And on the palate, it's typically light to medium bodied with soft tannins and that refreshing acidity that we keep talking about.
So it's not a heavy wine.
No, it's more about subtlety and nuance. It's a wine that you can really savor.
Okay, so we've got these fresh, mineral-driven whites and elegant reds. Are there any other styles that are starting to emerge from Mar del Plata?
Well, beyond those core styles, some producers are experimenting with wines that have a bit more complexity and aging potential.
Okay, like what?
You might find some Chardonnays that have seen a bit more oak aging, which gives them added texture and those, richer, nutty flavors,
Interesting.
or Pinot Noirs with a bit more structure that are built to age for a few years.
Okay, so there's a bit of diversity starting to emerge.
Yes, but I think it's safe to say that the defining characteristic of Mar del Plata wines is still that inherent freshness and vibrancy that comes from the coastal terroir.
Right, and for someone who's new to these wines, do you have any specific tasting tips? How can they really appreciate what makes them special?
Absolutely. When you're tasting a Mar del Plata wine, pay attention to the acidity. It's really a hallmark of these wines.
Right.
And see if you can pick up those subtle mineral notes, that salinity or that flinty quality. And also think about how those familiar grape varieties express themselves differently in this coastal environment.
Good advice. Now, these wines sound like they would pair beautifully with food, especially given that coastal location. I mean, seafood seems like a natural fit, right?
Absolutely. Mar del Plata wines are a natural match for seafood.
Okay.
That freshness, that acidity, that minerality, it all works beautifully with the delicate flavors of fish and shellfish.
So give me some specific examples. What are some dream pairings?
Well, imagine a crisp Sauvignon Blanc alongside some grilled sea bass, or a lemon butter sauce,
Oh, sounds delicious.
or a Chardonnay with some freshly steamed mussels or oysters.
Perfect. So a real taste of the sea enhanced by the local wine.
Exactly. And it's not just seafood that works well. Those bright, refreshing qualities also make them versatile partners for a range of dishes.
Okay, like what?
Well, the white wines can handle lighter meats like chicken or pork, and they're great with creamy pasta dishes where the acidity cuts through the richness.
Makes sense. And what about the Pinot Noir?
Pinot Noir is a bit more versatile than people often give it credit for. It can pair beautifully with things like mushroom-based dishes, lighter game meats, or even some spicier cuisines.
So it's not just a wine for Thanksgiving turkey.
No, definitely not.
And you've mentioned the importance of acidity and minerality in these pairings. Why are those characteristics so key when it comes to matching wine with food?
Well, acidity acts as a palate cleanser. It cuts through richness and fattiness in food, refreshing your taste buds and preparing you for the next bite.
Okay.
So think of it like squeezing a lemon on a piece of grilled fish. It just brightens everything up.
Right. And what about the minerality?
Minerality can complement the salty flavors in seafood, or it can bring out earthy undertones in vegetarian dishes. It just adds another layer of complexity and synergy to the pairing.
It's like the wine and the food are having a conversation.
Exactly, they're enhancing each other.
So do you have any final tips for our listeners who might want to try some Mar del Plata wines with food?
Well, don't be afraid to experiment. We've given some classic pairings, but ultimately it comes down to personal preference. Try different combinations and see what you enjoy.
Okay.
And remember, it's not just about the food and wine, it's about the whole experience. The atmosphere, the company, the freshness of the ingredients, it all contributes to a memorable dining experience.
Well said. All right, so let's shift gears and talk about the future. What does the market landscape look like for Mar del Plata wines? And what are some of the trends and challenges on the horizon?
Well, as we discussed earlier, that indication géographique is really crucial for protecting and promoting the region's wines.
Right.
It provides a framework for quality and authenticity, which is so important for building consumer trust and recognition.
Absolutely. It's a sign that these wines are the real deal.
Exactly. And there are some producers who are really leading the way in terms of quality and innovation.
Oh, yeah. Like who should our listeners be looking out for?
Well, Trapiche, Costa, and Pampa is definitely a big name. Their Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir are often considered benchmarks for the region. And Bodega Puerta del Abra is another standout producer. They're known for their Chardonnay and Pinot Gris, which really showcase the elegance and finesse of Mar del Plata.
So those are some names to keep in mind.
Definitely. And beyond those specific producers, there are a growing number of smaller wineries that are also doing amazing things.
So it's an exciting region to explore.
It is, and luckily there are some consumer trends that are working in Mar del Plata's favor.
Well, like what?
Well, globally, there's a growing interest in fresher, more unique, and terroir-driven wines. People are looking for wines with a sense of place, and that's exactly what Mar del Plata offers.
Just like they're perfectly positioned to capitalize on this trend.
They are, but there are still challenges.
Okay.
One of the biggest is production scale. Mar del Plata is still a relatively small region, so they don't have the same volume as some of those larger, more established wine regions.
Right.
And they also need to increase visibility and awareness in a crowded international market.
So it's a matter of getting the word out.
Exactly.
So how are they tackling those challenges?
Well, wine tourism is becoming increasingly important.
Okay.
Getting people to visit the region, experience the vineyards firsthand, and taste the wines in their local context can be a really powerful way to build awareness and loyalty.
It's like experiencing the terroir with all your senses.
Exactly. And they're also actively promoting their wines through events, collaborations with sommeliers, and really highlighting Mar del Plata as a distinct cultural and gastronomic asset of Argentina.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
It is, and it seems to be working.
That's great to hear. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into a truly unique and compelling wine region, just to sum up. Mar del Plata is a promising and innovative Atlantic wine region in Argentina, offering a distinctive and exciting counterpoint to the country's more established inland wine-producing areas.
And it highlights the incredible diversity of Argentina's winemaking potential and the fact that there are still so many exciting discoveries to be made.
Absolutely, and the story of Mar del Plata is still unfolding. It's a journey of balancing those emerging traditions of coastal viticulture with a commitment to innovation and a real desire to express that unique Atlantic influence.
And it's a journey that's worth following.
Definitely. So for all you listening out there, if you're looking for something new, something refreshing, something that really speaks of a place, seek out a bottle of Mar del Plata wine and experience firsthand how those coastal influences can shape the character of wine in such unexpected and delightful ways.
Huh.
Until next time, cheers.